Welcome, welcome, welcome to this week's episode of Heart Chronicles with myself, Minister Tasha, and my lovely co-host,
Miss Amber B.
Today, we're going to be talking with some beautiful, wonderful, empowering women about the rise of women in the corporate world. Thank you, ladies, for joining us on this week. We got these powerhouses, feel all this strong energy, all this melanin popping. Woo! So I'm just going to have you guys introduce yourself. Tell us a little about yourself, what you do, who you are, who you work with, your position in power.
Well, I'm Lauren Coleman. I'm Regional Vice President and Broker of one of the largest brokerage in the Kansas City market area.
Okay, all right.
I'm Rochelle Parker. I am the CEO of the Child Abuse Prevention Association, a nonprofit that operates out of Independence, Missouri. I'm also a real estate agent and an investor, and my husband and I own a t-shirt business.
Okay, all right, boss.
And I am Bridget Williams. I am Executive Director of the Heavy Constructors Association, which is the umbrella organization for all of the construction general contractors that build our infrastructure. We represent 2 states, Kansas and Missouri, and I'm the first woman, first African American in the country.
All right. The first woman in the country. That is huge. So let's start with you, since you just gonna kick us off with that at the end. The first woman in the country. What did that feel like when they appointed you to that position?
Well, I didn't know it until I had been hired for the position.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it feels like anything else, I think. I think what is different is the attention that it brings.
Okay.
And just the pressure to succeed.
Okay.
Okay. So when you say the attention that it brings, do you think that you bring another layer of, I guess, responsibility because you are a woman of color? Do you feel like you have to maybe work a little harder just to kind of prove yourself? Because I think sometimes we think that when we go into those areas of position of power, we kind of feel like the responsibility on us is a little heavier than it is for others.
Right.
Do you feel that way sometimes?
I feel that way. I also feel that there's an added responsibility to bring people along
Okay.
Okay.
that, white males don't feel. They don't feel that pressure. I think they do it. But there is an added expectation that for women and for people of color, we have to bring each other along.
Right.
I think the other thing is there is just a stigma with women in general. And so breaking that stigma is huge.
Would you guys agree with your positions?
I would agree. I would agree that there is a way that people that we work with, expect women to behave and act and respond, and then add to that the fact that if you're a woman of color, oftentimes for me, fighting that angry black woman, expectation, where when I do calmly or firmly, ask for something, I'm not angry, they're like, oh, like really?
You don't have an attitude.
Yeah, it's like, where does that come from? And then the added responsibility to represent all women of color and answer all questions as if we all like the same things
Yes.
and think the same way. And sometimes that's an honor, though, to do that. But sometimes it's a little bothersome.
I like being surprised when you do behave in a certain way. I'm like, it's almost like, oh, that's what I would expect from a white man or a white female or really like a white male. But it's like, oh, you have that ability, or oh, you speak really well. You probably hear that a lot. So it is feeling like you're constantly fighting a certain stereotype. Yeah, a certain mold.
So when you all, as you say, you have to kind of to some degree fight the different stereotypes. Do you think that you all have to build the bridge for creating a different stereotype as well? I know that oftentimes when we see women that are in the position of power that are women of color, we automatically have this stereotype that do they really know what they're doing? Are they really qualified for the position? And I feel like you have to constantly fight that battle of proving yourself to others. So are you all kind of, in your roles, are you in particularly trying to create a different stereotype for women that are in those positions?
I don't think about intentionally creating another stereotype because I'm just me.
Okay.
You know, I'm Rochelle. You know, I'm a woman. I'm African American, but I don't represent all women. I don't represent all women of color. So I don't know that I think about that. Now, when I get upset, sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want to feed into a stereotype.
Okay.
And maybe I'm a little bit more thoughtful and you know, intentional about not feeding into a stereotype.
Right.
But
Okay.
I try to just build rapport with people, get them to trust me and see me just as a person.
That's good.
Which in the community I work with here in Kansas City, this particular city right outside of Kansas City is primarily white and historically has been not open to women or men of color. And trust is very important in communities like that. But I don't know that I just try to represent in a different way. I think I just try to be myself.
What about you, ladies?
And I think that's so important to be who you are and be comfortable in your own skin. I'm like you, Rochelle. I don't consciously think of that, but I do consciously think about being humble and being the right leader and being intentional about doing the right thing, not the easy thing. And I think that garners respect and it builds relationships, and that's what helps you move forward. So I think when I assess things, because I find in my industry, at least the construction industry, which is in and of itself a predominantly white male industry, just by nature of what it is, I find myself just being intentional about whatever that issue is, making sure that I'm paving the way, you know, opening the door for other people of color, women, and white women for that matter.
Good.
That's good.
And I'll say when you mention humility, and which is important, you know, because I feel like when it comes to, let's say, like a white male, for instance, I feel like they don't have to express like as much humility. You know, they can be very, I don't want to say arrogant, but they can be very confident, and we're confident too. But it's like you have to bring that confidence with humility, which you know, we as Christians too, we have that. But it's kind of like if you come off as too confident or too, it's kind of like, whoa, you know.
It's a bit much.
It kind of makes you feel like someone wanting to back you up a little bit. You know what I mean? Like wait a minute, okay, see the I mean, not just the potential, see the greatness in that woman of color, for instance. But it's just like, oh, wait a minute, getting too high up there, or I don't know. I'm trying to
Kinda
say it
not-
in a way. You know what I'm
And
trying
I've
to say?
experienced this, Lauren, where
Yeah.
I've had women who are not women of color try to check me in a community meeting as if you're new to our space. This is not your space. Why are you here? And they'll say things like, well, those of us who's been around for 50 years, and those of us who are from this part of the town.
Entitlement.
I'm like, you know what? I'm still confident with that humility,
Right.
and I know
There we
what I
go.
know,
Yes.
and I know my contribution to this community, and I don't back down. But they try it.
You know, and that's a good point, because it is a different fight for women of color that are in leadership, because we get it from all ends.
Yep.
We get it from our own people. We
Yes.
get it
Right.
from women.
Right.
And then, you know, white men are a little suspect. And so I have found that in large part, a lot of my battles have come from African American men.
Wow.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
so, because there is a feeling that we are taking the space, they're using us to take a space that they should have. And rather than embracing and supporting, at least initially, there is pushback. And so you have to find a middle ground in all of that. And, you know, some you win, some you lose, but that's really where it really does take a lot of confidence.
Wow.
You know, there's a company, I just recently read an article on LinkedIn with the company Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs has made the decision that they no longer will partner with corporations that do not have women in the executive positions
Okay.
that are on their
Wow.
board. So if a company does not have a woman on their board, they are not willing to partner with them.
That's
And I
good.
think that is such a bold move for a corporation
is.
that big.
It is.
And I think their purpose for doing it was that they have had greater results when they have worked with companies that have had women on the board. Do you think that other companies should jump on board with this, or do you think we're going down a pathway where our world is changing, where we are saying, hey, let's try something different. Maybe the women are bringing more to the table than we've
Right.
given them credit for.
Right.
So what are your thoughts about them making a decision such as this to say, hey, if you don't have a woman on your board, we won't even do business with you?
Well, yeah, kudos to Goldman Sachs for that.
Right. Yeah, that's huge. That is huge.
They have a lot to lose by saying that, but you know, diversity of opinion and experience and thought is very important. And now we hear the term diversity and inclusion. You know,
Yes.
meaning
Right.
don't bring me here because I'm a black woman unless you're going to include me in and listen to me and actually implement some things I say. So I think women, people of color, people with all types of different backgrounds, whatever that may look like, should be at the table at every major corporation.
I would agree.
Yeah, and I think you also have to be careful about having a woman just to have a woman.
Yes.
It also
Yes.
needs to be the right woman. You know, I watched the Democratic debate for the first debate I watched, and it was an interesting conversation to hear a panel of white people talk about civil rights. And you know, you wonder, without having those opinions in the forefront, like in the office, on the panel, or whatever, really how good your decisions really are. Because a lot of it is about perception.
That's
I can't
right.
tell you how many perceptions we've probably changed just by
Yes.
virtue of being in the positions that we are.
Yes,
That's true.
absolutely.
That's true.
And when you
That's
don't,
true.
when you work in an organization where you don't see a lot of women in positions of power, I speaking for myself, when you're in a position you don't see that, it does change the momentum.
Yes.
Versus if I go into an organization where I see women that are in positions of power and women that are leading and managers and executives, when I don't see that, I'm immediately feeling like, well, it's probably not a lot of opportunity here. But when I see it, that just makes me want to work a little harder because that
Right.
says there's a door that's open for me
Right.
in this particular industry. One of the things that I've noticed is that there's something that happens when women get in the different areas of management. They're visible, but to some degree, they can also be invisible. And when I say visible, yes, I see you as a woman, or I see you as a woman of color in this position. But as you just pointed out, you're still, to some degree, to some individuals, you're invisible. I see you here, I gave you a spot, but I'm not really listening to everything you have to say because I need you to prove why you
Right.
deserve to be here.
Right.
I'll let you in,
Right.
but you're going to have to do a little
gotta
more
prove
to
yourself,
prove.
yeah.
Do you all feel like in your roles you've had to do that to some degree?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think being a woman might get you to the table. It's not what keeps you at the table.
good.
And so you have to bring value to whatever conversation it is that's being had. And I think part of it is not being afraid to be authentic, not being afraid to speak truth to power, and not being afraid to stand up for what you truly believe in. Now, that being said, you do have to choose your battles.
Okay.
But, I think that you use whatever resources you have to get to the table, but you also have to have some capacity to join the conversation to stay at the table.
That's
Okay.
good.
And I
That's
think
good.
you have a responsibility to keep people at the table with you. So if I'm in a position of power, even outside of my organization, especially in a community sense, I'm going to pick out the person of color in the room and say, so what do you think? And how would you like to contribute? Because sometimes we can feel that an environment doesn't want us to speak up and people will shy away. And so picking out that woman and saying, okay, from a woman's perspective, what do you think? So I think we hold that responsibility to give people the seat right next to us at the table and
That's good.
encourage them.
That's real good.
And remind them
Agreed.
being authentic is what we need. We
Yes.
need authenticity, we need transparency, and we need everybody contributing and not being afraid to do that.
That's
Right.
good.
Good.
And I mean, I would also say when it comes to getting to the table, being a female in itself, I do believe that there are lots of companies out there where when they bring a woman to the table, it's not just because they're a woman, it's because they are highly capable, confident, trustworthy, have those different values that are needed and expected with us when it comes to being a CEO or being a vital member of the community that you're working in. So, I mean, I do think it's good, like with, Goldman Sachs, wanting to say that they're not going to work with companies that don't have women in those leadership roles. I think it's it's good, but then I also don't want there to be a stigma to where it's like, oh, the only reason you're there, you
Is
know, is
because-
because you're a
Right.
woman. It's like, no, I see the value in
Right.
you. We
Yeah.
need that, not just your perspective as a woman or a woman of color, but you have a lot to bring to the table when it comes to knowledge and your whole perspective in general. you
That
know,
is true.
so-
And you bring up a point when you say that usually if a woman is in a particular role, she's not there just as a seat filler. Someone felt she was capable and qualified to be in that particular role. So with that said, are there any particular qualities or characteristics that you all believe is needed for someone
was just
to
ready to
move
ask
into
that. I was just
the
ready to ask
area
that.
of leadership? I mean, because it's such, there are so many women out here that I believe have the desire to be in positions of leadership and management,
they
and
do.
it's not for everyone.
Right.
But I do believe
Right.
there are certain individuals who have the qualities and the skill
That
sets,
can be cultivated.
but they don't know how to move into those roles. So
That's
how
right.
did you move into that role? Because I know hard work was definitely one of the attributes that you had to have, but are there other qualities or characteristics that you believe maybe stood out that said, hey, she's the
She's the
one we
one.
need in that
Right.
role?
Well, this is a relation-based world we're in. And so you have to be able to build relationships.
And I think that's challenging
And
for us as women.
It is. It's very challenging because there's an immediate distrust, and
Yeah.
and especially for women, one of the first questions I was asked when I was being interviewed for a position was, how do you get along with other women? And
I've
I
never heard
said,
that question.
and
Right.
you got to be able to work with women. And I said, well, do you work with women? And I mean, it stopped them. And it was like, well, yeah, well, that's how I will work with women. Like, it's, but there's a different standard or a perception in how women work together and how women work
Wow.
for men. And so I think that also has
That's
to be part of your process. Is it's really not how you work for the genders, whether it's women or men. It's about how you're able to maneuver through to deal with the issues that face you on that particular day.
Okay.
And so you really have to have flexibility and the ability to admit when you're wrong, and to listen. To me, I think there are so many leaders out there that just will not listen.
Wow.
So if you have that, you're already ahead of the game.
Oh, that's
Good.
good.
That's
Yeah.
I
good.
agree, those are all good. I'm sitting here thinking, so I work in a primarily female-dominated industry of social work. And so for us, modeling, family work-life balance is huge compared to some other industries. And so where other industries would tell me to work really, really hard and, burn the midnight oil and be there before everybody and leave after everybody, my industry is not that way. And so showing that I can go home and cook for my kids at some point in the day, or that I came in late because we had a dental appointment, is something that's important. Showing that other side,
The
that
balance.
other responsibility. of it,
Yeah,
balance.
which
yeah,
is real family
yeah,
responsibility.
yeah.
So that would be my first one, is really just being honest about all of your responsibilities and balancing those well. Then integrity, of course, integrity and transparency. I just want people to be transparent, tell the truth the first time. So
That's
we
right.
can make this go fast.
That's right.
And people appreciate that
They
because
do.
they don't ever have to wonder where they stand with you. They don't have to guess and think that there's some ulterior motive. They're like, hey, you get what you see, see what you get. So.
That's good.
And I think trust is a big piece.
Yes.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to that whole relationship piece. Can I trust that you're going to do what you said you're going to do? Can I trust that you're going to come through on a project? Communication. If something's coming up and it looks like you're not going to be able to come do or make do with that deadline, do you communicate that well? Not when it comes to your interactions with your peers. So I'd say when it comes to leadership, looking at potential new leadership, when they look at how they interact with their peers. Are you stabbing your peers in the back? Are you coming to leadership and saying certain things, basically doing whatever it takes to get ahead? Well, when I look at that, it's just like eventually I have to trust you to come up to the same level as me, potentially. Am I going to want to work with you? I mean, people look at that in general. Like you can have the intelligence, the skills, but can we work together? Is
Right.
this going to work? And that's
Right.
male, female, it doesn't
Right.
matter what
Absolutely.
color.
Right.
That's a big piece too.
It is.
Yeah.
And because I'm not a boss that micromanages. And so if you see something needs to be done, or I've
expect you
asked
to
you to
do it.
do something, I don't want to come back and ask you, well, what's going on with that? And so that is really one of the strengths that I look for in people. Do you follow through?
That's
Does it
good.
make my job easier
Right.
or more
Because I
challenging?
would rather be playing
Yeah.
golf while y'all doing what y'all supposed to do. I mean, if an organization is based on one person, its success is based on one person, it's going to crumble.
Right.
Right. It's a team.
So it's a team.
It is a team effort.
Rochelle, you touched on something a few minutes ago. We talked about the office world, but you touched on the balance of family. How is it balancing the power and then coming home to submission?
Well, you know, it's interesting.
That's a good one.
Well,
That is.
Yes.
It is, because actually when I come home, I think, well, I won't say I shut it off all the time. Certain things that we've agreed that
Right.
I'll do, like the finances and things like that. But for the most part, when I get home, I'm tired of being the boss. I'm tired of being social. You know, people are like, "You're so quiet." I'm like, I talk all day at work. I'm presenting all day. I'm, you know, trying to get people to donate to us and believe in us and things like that. So when I get home, I'm okay
Good.
with not being the boss lady and not being the leader and not speaking. I'm okay with just kind of having that downtime.
Yeah.
And doing self-care, because you can't do any of that 24 hours. You have to have some downtime at some point, some, you know, Netflix time, some chocolate bonbon time.
Right.
You know, time with your girlfriends, you know, things like that. So I'm absolutely okay with it.
What about you ladies? Was there ever a point where it was challenging for you?
You know, my husband often tells me, "You the boss at work."
Oh,
You know, my personality is like very much take charge, and so, you know, he'll remind me like, "Hey." When I, you know,
Soon
he
as you
feels like I'm
cross that
getting
door.
across that line, he'll say, "Hey, you the boss at work," and I'll be like, "Okay, you know, okay." Sometimes now, I mean, like, let's not get it twisted. I think the balancing of work and family is so important that, and this is where, for me, being in an all-male dominated world, that I think it was very tough for them to see a woman who was having babies in leadership and having to go home to pick a child up from daycare when they were sick. And but you can't shy away from that. And so I think that is so important to not only your work life, but your personal life. And actually for us, it strengthened our relationship.
Wow.
You know, in terms of, you know, my first priority is my family.
absolutely.
So-
Good.
And I'm
That's
glad you
good.
mentioned not shying away from it, because I talk to a lot of young ladies who say they want to be in leadership, but they say, well, then I don't need to get married, I don't need children, I don't need to do this. And it's like, well, that should be a part of what we desire too, if you desire it. Everyone
Right.
desires
Right.
it, but putting aside marriage or putting aside having kids to build your career, I've never been one to agree with that.
But I think that a lot of the millennials are moving toward that,
They
though.
are. They
That,
are.
that
They
career,
are.
that career
They are.
first.
Even the
And
males.
when you
Yeah,
work in
yeah.
an environment, I work in corporate America, and I work in when I say strict form of corporate America, I work in a very male-dominated, the technology world, and that is exactly how it is. The women that are trying to, you know, have the married life and the family life, they don't get the opportunities of those individuals that they notice are single, no children.
Have more time.
Because in their minds, they feel like your time can be, it can be shaken at any time. I particularly am in an environment where I am the only one with children in my entire department.
Wow.
So when I need to work from home or when I need to leave early, I always look like I'm the one pulling on the flexibility of the system.
Wow.
But I have a different need than
Right,
everyone else. And it's
right.
very difficult when you don't have women in positions
Yeah.
of leadership to have a little bit of understanding there. So I struggle in that area versus you all being in positions where you can make those calls and say, I understand this is maybe a true allegation, she needs to leave. I don't have that flexibility. So what do you do when you're a woman that is in a position
That's a good
where
question.
you desire to have that flexibility and you don't have it? How do you have those conversations with leadership to say, hey, we need to, you know, maybe provide some different alternatives with schedules or some different alternatives for being able to be promoted, because it's just, those opportunities aren't there when you have a married lifestyle.
Well, I think a lot. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I'll say, when it comes to some of my team members that are on my team that report to me and they have children, I don't know, competitions, things like that. They may have to leave work earlier or whatever the case may be. And they're like, oh, you know, I've got this going on and that. I'm like, oh, I understand. understand. I've got 2 kids in sports and this and that. Like, yep, that's fine. Just make that up here, or do, having that, providing that flexibility, especially when you're in a position where you can, as opposed to feeling like, oh, because I am a woman, it's like maybe I should be more strict on it to prove something to the others. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say it that way. To prove
You're
yourself
okay.
to someone else. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, no, this is reality. This is life. Work-life balance is important. I feel like the society as a whole is moving in that route anyway. When it comes to millennials and things like that, that work-life balance is important. So even for males, they have wives that have children. They understand. They know that maybe they can stay late, but their wife can't, or maybe their wife, is a stay-at-home mother, but they understand that need for that flexibility, and not trying to suppress that, but communicate that. Like, yep, this is going on with me. I have to leave early, or this person had to leave earlier. Their child was sick and can't come in today. But that flexibility is important, especially if you want to keep people.
Yeah.
Cost of turnover is expensive.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you want to keep your loyal, trustworthy workers.
It is really important, though, for workers to feel like they can have that conversation with somebody. Whether it's the person in the C-suite or their direct supervisor, that conversation should be had. That, and in some ways, it could be a part of the negotiations for raises and increases. Like, you may not necessarily, the money may not be as important as the flexibility at work. I would have to say that being a wife and a mother made me a much better leader,
I would agree.
because you learn that's where you learn your negotiation skills and your patience.
You do.
It really
And you learn how to take one for the team.
Yes. And you know when to draw a line in the sand,
Yes.
and you know when to say, because I said so. It's all of that. And so I feel like companies that aren't flexible like that are really missing out on the true opportunity for real leadership, because of that notion that, you think they should be at home taking care of their kids. So
But I think as people are looking for jobs, like you mentioned, the negotiation process, look for companies that are family friendly. Ask those questions. When we interview, we're also interviewing the employer. And if it
That's
doesn't
right.
sound like it's going
That's
to be a
right.
good fit, then
And
it's,
most people don't know
it's not
that.
that's right.
Some people are
That's
afraid.
right.
They're afraid. That's right.
Because of the desire to be employed outweighs the
Right.
realities of what
Of what they
happens when you,
need.
yes.
That's true.
Well,
So this
and
is
a-
when I do a pitch for the nonprofit sector, because a lot of people,
Go ahead.
I was growing up doing community service with my family in church and going to the soup kitchens, and never knew that nonprofits were a career. We have CEOs, we have CFOs, we have CITs, and chief, HR representatives and things like that. And by nature and virtue of what we do, we want people to have a healthy family. We want you to take time off. About 3 years ago, our board gave us all one additional day off a month just for self-care. So people go swimming or sleep or whatever they want to do, because it's important. And so I think we owe it to ourselves, whether it's, interviewing in an industry or for a job, is this going to be a good fit? And if it's not, trusting that God will find us something that's going to be a good fit, that's going to still meet all of our needs.
That's good.
Well, and I think the other thing is you can't be afraid to be told no.
That's right.
A lot of companies don't do it because people have never asked. It's not that they don't want to do it, it's that they haven't really thought about it. I remember the first person that got paternity leave. The first guy that
Wow.
got paternity leave. And it wasn't that the company didn't want to do it, it was just something you don't think
Right.
about.
That's right. You
Yeah,
don't think
so
about that.
you have to ask. The worst that you can be told is no.
That's right.
And
true.
coming from an organization that just got a paternity benefit for the women just this year.
Oh, wow.
And we only got that because we just got ahead of our head CEO over our HR team is a woman. And she just came in within the last year. So that's why we now have a paternity
Wow.
benefit. So again, I believe putting women in position, it opens up the opportunity, it opens up the vision, it allows others to see things that you can't necessarily see. So I definitely think there's a benefit there. So
That's good.
it's having women in position of power is not only beneficial, it is eye-opening, it is refreshing.
It is.
Because it brings in different perspectives
It does.
that in the past have not been perspectives that have been shared, just because we have kind of to some degree had a muzzle placed on us on what being heard. So I commend you women
Yes, 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 yes.
for being able to be in your positions, to be authentic,
Yes.
to bring about some change, to be able to sit in the seats that a lot of young women desire to be in.
And speaking of that, as we close, what advice will you give to other women that desire to be at the table? Those that aspire to be and those that may be a little fearful. They want to, but they're afraid. What advice would you give them?
I would say don't let fear stop you. You have to be willing to take a risk. I started as a part-time receptionist
Wow.
with the organization for my first leadership job and answered an ad in the newspaper. Everybody told me not to do it when I ran for president of the Greater Kansas City AFL-CIO. I did it, won 4-1.
Wow.
Was the first African American, the first female, and the
Whew, that gave me
youngest in the
chills.
country to do it
At what age?
at the age of 27.
Wow.
Had I listened to the
Amazing.
people that felt like they had my best interest at heart, or maybe they didn't, but you know, who knows where I would be.
Right.
So you have to be willing to take a risk,
That's good.
and if the risk doesn't work out, you have to be willing to walk away. I mean, it is, you can find a job. What you should be looking for is a career.
That's good.
That's
That's
good.
good advice.
Very
I
good
agree.
advice.
I would add to that getting a mentor. As you mentioned earlier on in this discussion, white men naturally help promote each other. They naturally call their buddy from Harvard and say, can you do my little
Right.
cousin a favor and give him a job? And our culture sometimes has a hard time doing that because we just want to earn it. Well, sometimes we just have to give you a chance.
That's it.
Especially
Right.
if
That's
you've
right.
never had
That's
the
it.
experience, whether
That's
you're
right.
right out of school or whether you're switching careers. Sometimes you just don't have the experience. And it is okay to bring each other up. And it is
It
okay to
is.
give each other
It
jobs.
is.
But be mentored and be teachable and want to listen and have some plans that you follow through on. Without some of the actually white women that mentored me, I probably wouldn't be in the position I'm in.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Absolutely.
And so I think anybody who can be my mentor,
Yes.
whether that's professionally or even a spouse or a parent or a pastor, just get a team of people
That's
that
right.
can help you and tell you when you're wrong and give you kudos when you're right.
That's right.
But that can really challenge you and encourage you to take those risks as well.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's good.
I'd say, and that's a good point with the mentorship, no matter who the person is, because when it comes to, I'll say when it came to me opening up to the idea of having a mentor, I always had my idea of what that mentor would look like, a black woman. And when my mentors ended up being white men, it was just like, I kind of like held back from that at first, and then I accepted it for my own biases. I know it sounds crazy, I know, but it's something I had to deal with because it's not what I expected, and it worked out really well.
That's good.
And I'll say if you're already in a place where you're in a career where you want to move up, a big piece is whatever role you're in, see yourself in that role, and if you were the owner of that company, how would you want that person in your role to treat their job? You know, doing unto others what others,
that's
doing,
good.
what is it? Doing
Unto
unto
others.
others as you would want them to
Them
be
doing
done
to
to
you,
you.
yes.
Yeah, this is like, especially if you have entrepreneurship goals, this is like, how would I want my employees to work for me?
That's good.
That's how I'm going to work for my employer.
That's good.
And you can't
That's
fake it. It has to be
real good.
something
That's
that you
good.
really,
Yes.
is
That's
in
who you are.
Yes.
Exactly. It
That's
has to be,
good.
because people can spot out the fakes.
That's
you know?
right.
Yes.
You don't get into higher roles without having discernment.
That's
So
right.
you have to have that in you.
That's good. That's
That's
good.
good.
real
That's
good.
really good. You guys have given us some wonderful advice, especially for individuals such as myself. I definitely desire to be in a role of leadership and management. I know you all know that because I've spoken with you guys about that many times. But I am taking these little nuggets of wisdom that you all have given to us today,
Yes.
and I will make sure that I apply them, and I'm sure that our listening audience will apply
Yes.
them as well. So again, we thank you guys for
Thank
tuning
you.
in on another edition of Heart
Heart
Chronicles
Chronicles.
with myself, Miss Amber B, and my lovely co-host.
Minister Tasha Gadsden.
And our lovely guests, we thank you for
Thank you.
joining in with
Thank
us and sharing your
you.
information.
Yes.
You all are powerhouses
Oh, yes.
to the third degree. And I just thank you for sitting in with us. You all
Yeah.
have been a breath of fresh air. You guys have provided a lot of insight on what it is to be in positions of power. So again, we thank you guys
Thank
for tuning
you.
in. We will see you next time on another episode of Heart
Our
Chronicles. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.